Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. With is my co-host, John Barker. And John always brings in a special guest. And today he's brought in a special guest, Daniel Hawkins from the 100th District out of Wichita. And Daniel, we're always glad to have you here. This will be, we were talking before we went on air, this will be maybe the 5th time you've been here, third time
this year.
Yep. Yeah, and we thank you for coming and taking time. And if you haven't been watching the show, let me fill you in a little about it. First off, you've missed a lot, and you'll be able to check some websites that we'll put up on the screen after a bit, and you can go check them out. But what happens is the legislature's in session. John's the representative for the 70th District, which is our district. And on Friday afternoons, John comes back from Topeka, stops in, and we do a show so we get the most current, accurate information concerning the legislature and what's going on. And then John brings a special guest with us, with him almost every time, and then we get more information, and we share that information, and we put it out so that the people who are watching the show can get the straight information, and it's not modified by the press or anything else, and not that they're wrong with anything. It's just the way you see it because you're right there in the trenches. And frankly, appreciate it that John's been our representative for years, and I appreciate it that John comes out and he brings a special guest who's been involved in the trenches for years, because, man, it's a job. I'm learning a little bit about this. It wasn't bad at first, but the more I get involved in it, why I can find myself getting mad over things.
Yeah, that's the way it works, Doug.
Yeah, and I'm just one vote.
And I'm just one vote, but, you know, we've been doing this, I think, for almost 3 years now. You know, Dan is the majority leader in the House for the Republicans. We have the majority in the House. This is day 56, I believe, of the session, and everybody's getting a little tired, you know, the long hours, but we've had a busy week. A couple of the high points is we passed a bill out of Federal and State Affairs, where I'm the chair, on Senate Concurrent Resolution 1606. It came over from the Senate. It had to do with abortion. We passed it out of committee, and the next day we had it on the floor of the House. Well, Dan and I'll talk about the debate. Yesterday, the Senate passed out or concurred to the House amendments to Senate Bill 22, and they passed it out. They accepted our amendments. And if you recall, that's the one that your taxes, if you pay taxes, income taxes in the state, had we not decoupled, your taxes would have been raised because of the federal government, because they did a tax cut, but they limited the deductions. So we put those back in on the state level. So if we had done nothing, average families who pay taxes would pay anywhere from $300 to $600 more a year. We did decouple them. They passed it out of the Senate, came to the House. We added in 1 cent reduction in food sales taxes, and we added in a little loophole that has been used on internet purchases. We collect about 90%. The 10% that we don't have, those folks are really responsible to remit to the state their sales tax. Of course, most people don't know that. They didn't do it. So we closed that loophole. Yeah. So we'll collect an additional 10%, which will be about $40 to $70 million. And that will offset the 1 cent sales tax. I know the press and the other party have indicated we're giving corporations tax breaks. We're really not. We're allowing them to bring it in back to the state and pay a lower tax, but it's on foreign investments. So if we didn't allow them to do that, and the federal government did not allow them to do that, if, for example, if they had a company in France that made quite a bit of money, they would keep the money in France. So the federal government reduced the tax rate. We have allowed them to bring it back in, and that's a good thing, because now they'll invest that money in the United States. The question, but to get back to Senate Bill 22, the reason Dan and I will talk about it, it goes to the governor. The question is whether the governor will veto it or not. If she vetoes it, and we can't override her veto, for those out there that pay taxes, you're going to pay more next year. So hopefully she will not veto it. It's what, 130 million?
Yeah, right at 130.
Right at $130 million that the state will get, which more than other years, and we didn't raise taxes. But it's just that loophole that we needed to decouple from the federal. So hopefully she will sign that. Dan, are you optimistic about that?
Well, I think it's going to be tough. You know, we want her to sign it, Doug, but I'm not sure that she'll sign it. But it's you know, our opponents, our friends on the other side of the aisle, want to call it a tax cut. It's not a tax cut. We never had the money, so it's truly not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's it. Interesting.
that's how government works.
Yeah, I hear you. We're going to cut away, take a break. When we come back, we're going to pick up that conversation and continue. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with John Barker, representative from the 70th, and Dan Hawkins, representative from the 100th District. Dan, I want to come to you for a minute on here. I know you're House Majority Leader, and we go through this, but it's a different audience, or it could be. And so what's a House Majority Leader do?
You know, we actually, it's such a busy job. I had no idea how busy I would be, but my job really, Doug, is as the bills come out of the various committees, I then schedule what's going to get debated on the floor. And in between that time, you have all of the different people who want to come in and pitch to you why their bill should get debated on the floor. So we call it the calendar. So I'm in charge of the calendar every day, deciding what's going to be debated and what doesn't. You know, at the end of the, we passed like 50 bills out of the House during the first half of the session, and of course our friends on the other side of the House has called us a do-nothing legislature this year. Well, we passed 50 bills out. So to say we didn't do anything is just a misnomer. So that's a big job, figuring out what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. So one of the things that, you know, John brought out a little bit ago was a Senate Concurrent Resolution 1606, which what 1606 is it's actually a resolution from the Senate condemning New York for their Reproductive Health Act, which basically allows abortion up to the point of birth, and actually even after birth.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
It's a horrible law that they did, and so I decided to allow that to come to the floor and be debated, and the debate was fierce.
It was.
You know, something that a resolution usually doesn't have any amendments, but we actually sustained 9 amendments in about a 3-hour period against that resolution, and out of those 9 amendments, there were 8 germaneness challenges, and he was Representative Barker here actually levied 6 of those germaneness challenges and won. And out of those, there were 2 rules chair challenges where the rules chair said it wasn't germane, and then the body was asked to vote on whether the rules chair was accurate or not. And in both of those challenges, we were able to sustain the rules chair.
Right.
So I know John's extremely effective at that.
Yeah.
It you know, it came out of my committee. The reason I was involved on the floor as much as but their amendments were not germane. I'll give you an example of one of the amendments. One of the amendments would strike out the last sentence, the resolved sentence, and add it in where they would condemn President of the United States, or no, any politician who has entered into an affair with an adult film star and paid hush money. That's how ridiculous they were. They had 8 or 9 of them. They were not relevant or germane to the resolution. But we spent, what, 3 hours?
Spent 3 hours, and actually, Doug, there were more like 15 or 20 amendments out there that they actually had. They brought 9, and after a while, they finally just said uncle and stopped. But it was just absurd. They were, when it came time to vote, so we had roll call votes on every single one of those votes. And at the end, we had a roll call vote, which is not necessarily normal on the resolution. And the Democrats chose to vote present. They wouldn't vote yes or no.
They voted, 32 of them voted present instead of voting yes or no.
Okay, I got to ask you this part here. I wouldn't have the patience for all that. So how do you guys handle all that when one thing comes after another? And and how do you keep from saying, like, really? Does that make sense to you? And how do you do that? What either side, whether it's the Republican or the Democrat, however it is, I don't know how you would keep your patience.
There were actually some amendments came that I went to the minority leader and said, you really don't want to do that, because there were some really absurd things.
And they were absurd, and they kept saying that it's not right for one state to condemn another state. So I went up and I told him, I said, you know, I'm one of the older guys here. I remember living in the 50s and the 60s when we used to have Jim Crow laws down in the South, and we had poll taxes. Other states condemned those states for that action and was able to get those type of things corrected, and they don't have those anymore.
And so they should have.
And so they should have, and so should the state of Kansas stand on principle. When it comes to, if another state's doing something so outrageous, then I think we have an obligation to send them a document and say, we don't approve of you. Because that helped Alabama and some of those southern states, Georgia, Louisiana, change their ways.
Yeah.
But they don't remember that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So the good thing is it did finally pass. The next day we passed it on final action, went back to the Senate, and they signed it. The Senate president signed it, and it's being shipped off to New York right now. So they'll be receiving our resolution condemning their action. So.
And it does. A resolution does not need the governor's signature, because I'm not sure she would sign it.
Wow, it just goes to them. I don't, you know, I have read the articles about with the abortion stance that New York has taken. As a matter of fact, I saw the footage of the legislature, how excited they were, tears running down their face, and I thought, am I missing something? Because we're talking about little babies, human life, and maybe I just don't understand the picture. Maybe it's because of all the gray hairs now. I just see it differently. But if somebody doesn't stand up for them, I don't know who does.
No, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, that's the way the majority of the legislature, and I think that's the majority of the way Kansans feel, is that truly to think about a baby being born and then allowed to die after its birth. It's just it's crazy, and we felt like we needed to say something, and we did. We said something.
Right. Yep. And if you've ever seen the footage of partial birth abortion, it's just like I don't even understand that. I don't even begin to understand. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with John Barker from the 70th District, which is our district where we're filming this right now. And then Dan Hawkins from the 100th District, which is the Wichita area. And it's Friday afternoon as we film this, and Dan and John have just come in from the legislature on their way back to their home districts, and they stopped by here to give updates and information. And we've been talking about a number of bills and what's going on in the legislature. Dan, where do you want to go from here?
So one of the big things that has just happened this week, about midweek, actually I think it may have been Thursday, so it's been yesterday, is the Senate passed their K through 12 funding, and kind of bring the listeners up to what's going on there. Is the governor came out with a plan. It was going to cost $90 million a year for a series of years, and the Fair Funding for Schools, which is the group that's been suing the state, they had supported the governor's plan. Everything was kind of going along there. And then all of a sudden, they decided that wasn't enough. They want another $270 million in addition to that $90 million, and they literally kind of blew a hole in this whole thing. Well, the Senate went on ahead and passed the governor's plan yesterday, so that's out there. It'll be coming to us next week. We have in the House, in our House K through 12 Budget Committee, a bill also, but our bill doesn't just give the governor everything she wants. It actually moves some money around to target it to mental health and various things. But also one of the biggest things it does, Doug, is it actually puts teeth in making sure that there's an outcome desired. You know, they've been putting money in, I think it's, John, wasn't it over $800 million over the last couple of years that we put in there?
$800 million.
If you go back 4 years, the outcomes aren't any better than they were 4 years ago, but we just keep throwing more and more money at it.
Well, the outcomes haven't changed since the 80s on the first lawsuit. You know, and every year they want more money, and more money, and we, you know, eventually we give them more money. but no one looks at the outcomes. And so we want to look at the outcome. If we're going to give you more money, then you're going to tell us you can improve these results and go higher.
Justify, you got to justify the funding for it, huh?
Exactly.
Wow.
So the Senate passed their bill. We'll have a bill probably out before the end of next week, I would imagine. And then we'll debate that bill, and of course they'll go to conference committee and we'll figure out what's going to happen there.
What do you project is the final result here? Because the legislature is, I think, from what I understand anyway, kind of under the gun. The Supreme Court's going to make some decision, and you guys have, John's always told me, and every guest has come on and said, the target is suitable.
Yeah.
And how do you reach that?
Well, and I think ultimately that's what we're going to decide this year. I think finally, for the first time, Doug, we had a major newspaper in this state finally say on the front page, will there ever be enough funding? Is it ever going to be enough? First time ever. It's always been, we want more, we need more. Well, we believe now it's no longer need, it's to just want more. They're getting what they need. And so we believe probably it's time to start slowing this thing down. And
that lawsuit group will tell you, we don't care where you get the money from. Take it from other agencies, take it from Health and Human Services, you take it from law enforcement.
Highway funding.
Highway funding, wherever. We just want more money because they think they have a constitutional right for it because of one word in our Constitution, that the state is to provide suitable education.
Well, and one of their quotes is other parts of government's just going to have some pain.
Yeah.
They don't mind other parts of government having pain, just not them.
I have read in one of the articles that you're looking at about half of the total money that the state has going into the school finance. That's
correct.
61 cents out of every dollar goes for K through 12 clear through higher ed. 61 cents. 28 cents goes to social services and Medicaid. That leaves 11 cents for all the rest of government. Those two areas get
salaries for
highway patrol, corrections.
Public safety.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how you guys put up with it. I don't know how you do it.
The other thing we have out there that Representative Barker, actually Chairman Barker in this case, is over is the sports wagering.
Yeah.
So sports wagering's now front and center, isn't it, John?
It will be next week. I have a bill being drafted. We've met with all the casinos. Sports wagering is where you're able to bet on professional sports, baseball, basketball, football, NFL, and they've all come to Topeka to visit with us, and also the NCAA tournament. Of course, this is March. Everybody's been watching the Big 12 tournament, and by the way, folks, West Virginia won last night, and may be playing KU. So we've got the bill. We're going to meet with the casinos, and we're also meeting with the lottery folks who, in Kansas, because of our Constitution, the gaming must be owned and operated by the state. Like our 4 casinos are owned and operated by the state, and of course, through the lottery stuff, we contract that out to people who are capable of doing that. So hopefully by the end of this session, before veto session, we will have a sports betting bill. Supreme Court opened it up last June. A number of states have already got on board and have passed theirs. We wanted to look at some of their mistakes before we start doing it. And so we will have a bill and we'll start having hearings on it in the near future.
And that was because, was that a federal lawsuit? Because Nevada had gambling, and why couldn't all the other states have it?
It was brought on by the state of New Jersey. They said, well, why does Nevada have sports book and we can't? And the Supreme Court took the decision and made, well, you can.
Well, there's so much underground sports betting, and so really we needed to do something to
the offshore
underground. You mean like offshore? And you're not getting any revenue. There's no control over it.
And we wanted to make sure that we had enough money to enforce it. So out of that bill, it looks like we'll probably give $1 million to the AG for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. They'll have to hire some special investigators that can do the computer work, see where the offshore things are happening, and close them down. So, and we'll pass a few other bills like the money laundering bill. But at some point in time, it's very possible you could go to Casey's. If it's a K-State, KU game, you could go make a wager just on that game and not in-game betting, just on that game.
Wow. Interesting.
for those who choose to want to do that.
Yeah, I understand. We're going to cut away and take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm Doug Thompson with my guest John Barker, and today Dan Hawkins. And coming up in the immediate future, John tells me we're going to have on May 10th, the Attorney General is going to be here as a guest on the show. And next week, the Minority Leader, Tom Sawyer, Democrat, is going to come in, and looking forward to that. And Dan, as always, man, it's a good to see you again.
Thank you, Doug.
And John, thank you for all
You're
you do
welcome.
at the legislature, all the work you guys put in on it. And thank you for taking time on a Friday afternoon after doing this all week to come back in, stop, and share it with us. Thank you, guys. You've
Thank
been
you,
watching
Doug.
Legislative Updates.